1962. Bumpy Johnson caught a traitor in his crew. 20 men circled the barbershop chair. Bumpy yanked the traitor's head back, pressed the straight razor against his throat, dragged its slow edge-kissing skin, never cutting. 7 minutes of that cold steel crawling. The traitor broke. 20 witnesses never spoke again. What travels slower than death? The Harlem barbershop exhaled its last breath of normalcy at exactly 3:22 p.m. Rain hammered the storefront glass like impatient fingers. And inside, the air hung thick with pomade, old cigarette smoke, and the metallic tang of wet wool coats. 23 men packed into a space meant for 15. Shoulders touched. Breath mingled. Nobody moved toward the door. The scissors kept working. Snip. Snip. The sound should have been routine, comforting even the barbershop symphony that had played out 1,000 times before. But today, each metallic click landed like a judge's gavel. The barber's hands moved with the mechanical precision of a man who'd already made his peace with what was coming. His customer sat rigid in the chair, staring straight ahead into the mirror, watching reflections that refused to meet his eyes. Marcus Squeaky Robinson wouldn't shut up. That was the problem. That had always been the problem. His voice cut through the silence like a car alarm nobody could turn off, talking about the Knicks game, about the weather, about his cousin's new Cadillac. Words tumbled out in a desperate cascade, filling every gap, every pause where judgment might slip through. The laugh that followed each statement came too loud, too quick, like a man drowning who'd forgotten how to swim but kept thrashing anyway. You see that game last night? Man. Oh man. Willis Reed put up 38 points. 38, I'm telling you. That brother's going to take us all the way this year. All the way to the championship. You watch. Squeaky's voice climbed half an octave. Nobody responded. The silence after his words felt heavier than the rain outside. Big Tommy stood by the door, not blocking it exactly, just standing there. 6'5" of muscle and scar tissue, arms crossed over a chest that had stopped bullets before. He wasn't looking at anyone in particular. Didn't need to. Everyone in that room knew what Big Tommy standing by the door meant. It meant the door was closed. It meant nobody was leaving until somebody decided they could leave. It meant witness. The other men found fascinating things to study. Shoelaces, fingernails, the water-stained ceiling tiles, anything but the mirrors, because mirrors don't lie. And in a room full of men who'd built their lives on carefully constructed truths, reflections became the enemy. In the mirror, you could see who was sweating, who couldn't hold still, who talked too much when everyone else had learned the value of silence. Old Jesse, who'd been cutting hair in Harlem since before most of these men were born, had taught his apprentices a simple rule when the room goes quiet. You go quiet with it. Words were like matches in a room full of gasoline, harmless until they weren't. So Jesse kept cutting, kept the scissors moving, kept his eyes on his work. But his hands, those steady hands that had shaped 10,000 heads, trembled just slightly. Just enough. The clock on the wall ticked forward. 3:23 p.m. Time moved like honey in winter, each second stretching out, making room for all the things nobody was saying, us, in the corner. Raymond Cooper's knee bounced up and down, a nervous metronome keeping time with some internal countdown only he could hear. Next to him, Eddie Fast Hands Martinez had his arms wrapped around himself, holding on like he might fly apart if he let go. Squeaky kept talking. Hey, you know what I heard? I heard they're putting in a new traffic light down on 125th. About time. Right, that intersection's been a mess for years. Nearly got clipped by a cab there last Tuesday. Driver wasn't even looking. These cab drivers nowadays. I swear they get their licenses from a Cracker Jack box or something. Nobody laughed, not even a courtesy chuckle. The joke died in the thick air, and for just a moment, Squeaky's voice faltered. His eyes, reflected in the mirror, flickered from face to face, searching for something recognition, agreement, mercy. He found only averted gazes and set jaws. The barber's scissors stopped, just for a heartbeat, just long enough for everyone to notice. Then they started again, but the rhythm had changed. It was the sound of a clock ticking down, of sand running out, of a trap door waiting to drop. When the door locks from the inside, Big Tommy said quietly, his first words since taking his position, everyone becomes a witness. His voice carried no threat, no emphasis. It was simply a statement of fact, like observing that water was wet or that winter came after fall. But every man in that room heard it for what it was, a prophecy already fulfilled. Squeaky's laugh came again, higher this time, brittle as old glass. What's everybody so serious about? Come on, fellas. It's just a Wednesday afternoon. Just getting our hair right. Staying clean. His hand went to his collar, adjusting it for the third time in as many minutes. The gesture of a man whose neck suddenly felt too exposed. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the window like it wanted in, or maybe like it was trying to warn them. But warnings were useless now. This room had made its decision before the first man walked through the door, before Squeaky sat down in that chair, before 3:22 p.m. became the moment when everything ordinary turned irreversible. Somewhere in the back, a floorboard creaked. Everyone heard it. Nobody looked, because looking meant acknowledging. Acknowledging meant becoming part of it. And every man in that room was desperately trying to convince himself he was just a barber, just a customer, just a guy who'd picked the wrong afternoon to get his hair cut. But guilt doesn't need a confession. It announces itself in shallow breathing and averted eyes, in words that come too fast or not at all, in the way a man holds himself when he knows the room has already decided his fate. And in that barbershop, at 3:23 p.m., with the door locked and Big Tommy standing guard, guilt had a name. It talked too much. It laughed too loud. And it was about to learn that in Bumpy Johnson's Harlem. Some debts could only be paid one way. The scissors resumed their work. Snip. Snip. But now every man in the room could hear the difference. The sound had teeth. Jesse's hands moved across Squeaky's head with the practiced efficiency of 30 years behind the chair. But something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't grooming anymore. This was ceremony. This was ritual. This was the last preparation before something irreversible. Squeaky talked faster. You remember when we were kids, running these streets? Man, things were simpler then, weren't they? Remember that summer when we... His voice cracked mid-sentence. He coughed, tried to cover it with another laugh. The laugh came out wrong, strangled, like a radio stuck between stations. In the mirror, 22 men studied their reflections with the intensity of people who'd never seen their own faces before. They watched Squeaky watch them. They saw him seeing what they all saw, the truth reflecting back in silver-backed glass. Because mirrors don't let you hide. Mirrors show you exactly who you are, exactly what you've done, exactly what's coming. Raymond Cooper's knee stopped bouncing. The sudden stillness was worse than the movement. Eddie Martinez's grip on his own arms tightened until his knuckles went white. In the corner, Old Man Washington closed his eyes, lips moving in silent prayer. Not for Squeaky, for himself, for all of them, for what they were about to witness and what that witnessing would cost. The rain picked up outside, sheeting down the windows until the street beyond became a watercolor blur. The barbershop felt smaller now, the walls closer, the ceiling lower. The air had weight. It pressed down on shoulders, squeezed lungs, made breathing an active decision rather than an automatic response. "Hey, Jesse, how about you clean up my line a bit more on the left side? Yeah, right there. Got to look sharp for this weekend." Taking Dorothy to see that new Sidney Poitier picture at the Apollo. "You seen it yet? I heard it's really something." Dorothy. She loves a good picture show. The scrape of shoe leather against linoleum cut through Squeaky's monologue like a knife through silk. Every head turned not toward the sound, but carefully away from it. The survival instinct of prey animals who know that acknowledgement equals participation. In the jungle, you don't make eye contact with the predator. In Harlem, you don't watch what you might have to testify about later, except there wouldn't be any testimony. That was what Big Tommy's presence by the door guaranteed. That was what the locked door meant. That was what happened when Bumpy Johnson decided someone had broken the only rule that mattered in his organization: loyalty. Squeaky's hand moved to his throat, fingers touching the fresh line Jesse had just cut. The gesture looked casual, but everyone saw it for what it was. A man checking to make sure his neck was still intact, still whole, still his. His eyes in the mirror found Big Tommy's reflection. For just a moment, their gazes locked. Big Tommy didn't blink, didn't smile, didn't threaten. He just looked back with the patience of a man who'd done this before, who'd stand by that door for as long as it took, who'd watch whatever needed watching and forget whatever needed forgetting. His face held the blank certainty of a closed book, everything important locked inside, nothing spilling out. "Sin doesn't need a confession," someone said quietly from the back. Nobody turned to see who'd spoken. The voice could have belonged to anyone, could have belonged to everyone. "Sin makes its own sound." And it did. Sin sounded like nervous breathing, like fingers drumming against chair arms, like the creak of leather shoes as weight shifted from foot to foot, like scissors that kept cutting even though the haircut was long finished, like rain that wouldn't stop, like a clock that kept ticking when everyone in the room wished time would just freeze. Just stop. Just give them a moment to figure out how they'd ended up here. Squeaky's laugh came again, but this time it barely made it out of his throat. "What's with all the doom and gloom in here? Come on, we're all friends, right? We've known each other since we were kids running numbers for Mr. Peterson, Remember how we'd race to see who could make their rounds fastest? I always beat you. Eddie. Always. You remember that, right?" Eddie Martinez didn't answer. Couldn't answer. His jaw was clenched so tight his teeth were probably cracking. Because he did remember. They all remembered. They remembered being kids together. Remembered dreaming together. Remembered building this life, this organization, this family, together. And that's what made this so much worse. Betrayal only hurts when it comes from family. A stranger stabbing you in the back is just crime. A brother doing it, that's tragedy. That's the kind of wound that doesn't heal. That's the kind of thing that has to be answered, has to be balanced, has to be made right in the only way that makes sense in a world built on trust and blood. The barber's cape came off with a flourish of striped cloth. Jesse shook it out, sending tiny crescents of hair floating to the floor like dark snow. He worked the neck duster with mechanical precision, powder puffing into the air, settling on Squeaky's shoulders like ash, like evidence of something burning that nobody could see yet. "There you go. Marcus, all cleaned up. Looking good." Jesse's voice carried no inflection, no warmth. The words were empty vessels, going through motions, maintaining the fiction that this was still just a haircut, just a Wednesday, Just another day in a Harlem barbershop. Squeaky stood. His legs wobbled slightly. He caught himself on the chair's armrest. Laughed again, that awful, broken sound that was becoming his signature. "Thanks. Jesse, put it on my tab. Yeah, I'll settle up with you next week. Dorothy's got me on a budget. You know how it is. Women and their budgets. Am I right?" Nobody answered. The silence after his question felt alive. Breathing. Watching. 22 men stood frozen in a tableau that would have looked normal from outside, just guys in a barbershop. Waiting their turn. Passing time. But inside that room, in the spaces between heartbeats, in the pauses between breaths, something ancient and inevitable was taking shape. The door stayed closed. Big Tommy hadn't moved an inch. And Squeaky, standing there in the center of the room with his fresh haircut and his desperate smile, finally understood what his mouth had been trying to outrun for the last 3 minutes. Guilt doesn't need a confession. It announces itself in the way a room full of brothers refuses to meet your eyes, in the way silence becomes its own accusation, in the way a locked door becomes a verdict. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, time ran out. The Rikers Island visiting room smelled like industrial disinfectant trying to mask the deeper stench of desperation and broken promises. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with the persistence of trapped insects, casting everything in that particular shade of institutional white that made healthy men look sick and sick men look dead. The metal table between Bumpy Johnson and his attorney was bolted to the floor not to prevent theft, but to prevent weapons. Everything in this room was calculated for containment. Bumpy sat perfectly still. He'd learned stillness in prison, had perfected it, while other men paced or fidgeted or let their nerves betray them. Bumpy had mastered the art of becoming stone. His hands rested flat on the table, fingers spread, not gripping, not clenching. Just there. Present. Patient. The fluorescent light caught the gray threading through his hair at the temples. He was 43 years old and looked 60. Prison had a way of accelerating time. They raided the warehouse on Amsterdam Avenue last night. His attorney, Marcus Webb, said quietly. He slid a newspaper across the table, though they both knew Bumpy had already heard. News traveled through prison walls faster than it traveled through the streets. Took everything, the whole shipment, knew exactly where to look, knew exactly when we'd be moving it. Bumpy didn't pick up the newspaper. Didn't need to. He'd learned to read rooms better than newspapers, and right now, Marcus Webb was showing him everything he needed to know in the tightness around his eyes. The way his fingers drummed once against his briefcase before going still. The micro pause before he spoke. Marcus was scared. Marcus thought this might be the beginning of the end. "Third time in 2 months, Bumpy said. His voice carried no emotion, no anger. It was simply a statement of fact. FB, I showing up right before we move product, right before we make collections, right before we execute operations. That's not luck. That's not good police work. That's information." The guard by the door shifted his weight. He was paid to not hear conversations in this room. Paid very well. But even men who were paid to be deaf noticed when Bumpy Johnson spoke. His voice had that quality, quiet but carrying weight, like distant thunder promising a storm. Marcus opened his briefcase, pulled out a legal pad covered in notes. His handwriting was cramped. Anxious. "I've been looking at the timeline, every raid, every interception. Every time they've been waiting for us, I've mapped it all out. I thought maybe we had a pattern problem. Maybe we were too predictable. Maybe they'd just gotten smart about how we operate." But Bumpy's eyes never left Marcus's face. He could see where this was going. had seen it coming since the first raid. But sometimes you had to let people arrive at the truth in their own time. Had to let them convince themselves so the conclusion felt earned, rather than imposed. But the operations they knew about, they weren't predictable. We changed times, changed locations, changed personnel. We did everything right operationally, and yet they still knew. They didn't know because they were smart, bumpy. They knew because someone told them. The word hung in the air between them. Someone. A rat. An informant. A traitor. The worst thing that could happen to an organization built on trust and blood. Because if you couldn't trust your own people, if the foundation itself was compromised, then everything became quicksand. Every operation became suicide. Every meeting became a potential trap. Bumpy was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was even softer than before. Dangerous soft. How many people knew about the Amsterdam Avenue shipment? Marcus consulted his notes, though they both knew he'd already counted. 6 people. You, me, Raymond Cooper, who arranged the warehouse, Tommy Washington, who was handling transport, Eddie Martinez, who was managing the product, and Marcus Robinson, who was running street security that night. 6 people, Bumpy repeated. He said it like he was tasting the number, rolling it around in his mouth to see what flavor it had. And the feds knew, which means one of those 6 people is feeding them information. One of those 6 people sold us out. The mathematics of betrayal were simple. 6 people. 1 secret. 1 leak. The equation only had one answer, but finding which variable was poisoning the formula that required something more than math. That required understanding people. Required knowing not just what they did, but why. Required looking past the surface loyalty and finding the cracks underneath. It could be anyone, Marcus said. He was sweating despite the cold. The visiting room was always cold, climate-controlled to discourage lingering, to make conversations shorter than they needed to be. It could be someone being blackmailed, someone who got arrested and flipped, someone who needed money, someone who... It's someone close, Bumpy interrupted. Has to be. These weren't street-level busts. They knew operational details, knew timing, knew specifics that only people in the room would know. That means it's not some corner boy trying to cut a deal. It's someone in the family, someone we trust, someone we brought into the room. The implications settled over them like fallout. Because if the traitor was in the family, then family dinners became interrogations. Friendly conversations became intelligence gathering. Every meeting became a test you didn't know you were taking. Trust became the most dangerous liability a man could have. "What do you want me to do?" Marcus asked. His pen hovered over the legal pad, ready to take notes, ready to receive instructions. But they both knew he wouldn't write anything down. Some orders existed only in the air, only in understanding, only in the space between what was said and what was meant. Bumpy leaned forward slightly. The metal chair scraped against concrete with a sound like a blade being sharpened. "I want you to do nothing. I want you to go back out there and act like we're in crisis mode. Act like we're scrambling. Act like we're scared and making mistakes. Let whoever's feeding information think they're winning. Let them get comfortable. Let them get confident. And then we run an experiment." Bumpy's smile was thin, cold, holding no humor at all. "We're going to tell each of those 6 people a different story, 6 different secrets, 6 different operations, and we're going to wait and see which secret the FBI knows about. Simple mathematics. When the equation balance, we'll know which variable was wrong." Marcus wrote nothing down, but his eyes widened slightly. He understood what Bumpy was proposing. It was brilliant and terrible in equal measure. It was the kind of trap that could only be set once because setting it meant accepting that one of your most trusted people was your enemy. It meant admitting the possibility of betrayal so completely that you engineered its revelation. It meant sacrificing the illusion of family for the reality of survival. And when we know, Marcus's voice was barely a whisper now, when we identify who it is. Bumpy leaned back. His face was carved from granite, expressions buried so deep they might never surface again. When we know, we'll handle it, the way we handle everything that threatens the family. Decisively. Completely. With a clarity that makes sure no one ever forgets what happens when you break the only rule that matters in this life: you don't betray your own. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The guard by the door shifted again. Outside the visiting room, someone was crying in another cell, the sound echoing through concrete and steel. Marcus Webb closed his briefcase with a soft click that sounded like a gun being cocked. "It's going to destroy someone," Marcus said quietly. "Maybe someone innocent. Maybe someone who just had bad luck. Maybe the math doesn't lie." Bumpy interrupted. 6 people knew. The feds knew. One of those 6 broke faith. When the numbers close, someone pays. That's not cruelty. That's not revenge. That's just the cost of doing business when business depends on trust. You want to build an empire. You build it on bedrock. And bedrock doesn't shift, doesn't compromise, doesn't forgive structural betrayal. Marcus stood. His legs were shaking slightly, though he tried to hide it. "I'll set it in motion. 6 stories. 6 tests. We'll know within a week. We'll know within 3 days," Bumpy corrected. "Whoever's feeding information can't help themselves. That's why they're doing it in the first place. They need to feel important. Need to feel like they're winning. Need to feel like they're smarter than everyone else. That need will make them move fast. And when they move, we'll see them." The visit was over. Marcus gathered his things, nodded to the guard, prepared to leave. But at the door, he paused, turned back. "Bumpy, what if it's someone we can't afford to lose? What if it's someone whose loyalty we need for other operations?" Bumpy's face could have been carved from stone. When he spoke, his voice carried the finality of a door closing, of a book shutting, of a story reaching its inevitable end. "Then we lose them. Because loyalty that's been broken can't be fixed. Trust that's been shattered can't be glued back together. When the foundation cracks, you don't patch it and hope for the best. You tear it down and rebuild it right. That's how empires survive. That's how families endure. That's how you make sure that when people think about betraying Bumpy Johnson, they remember what happened to the last person who tried. They remember that mercy has its limits, and that those limits end exactly where betrayal begins." Marcus left. The door sealed behind him with a hydraulic hiss. Bumpy sat alone in the visiting room, surrounded by walls designed to contain violence but couldn't contain thought. In his mind, he was already running the calculations. 6 people, 6 stories, 1 traitor. The equation would balance. It always did. And when it balanced, someone would learn that in Bumpy Johnson's world. There were debts that money couldn't pay. There were crimes that couldn't be forgiven. There were betrayals that could only be answered one way. The math was simple. Someone was about to stop being a variable and become a solution, a permanent one. Marcus Webb's hands shook as he spread 3 folders across his desk, each one identical on the outside, each one containing a different lie, each one a loaded gun aimed at someone's head. "You understand what we're doing here?" Marcus's voice cracked. "We're not just catching a rat. We're executing someone. Slowly, deliberately, with paperwork." Bumpy Johnson sat across from him, fresh out of Rikers, looking harder than Marcus had ever seen him. Prison had burned away everything soft. "We're protecting the family. That's all that matters," Now tell me about the traps. Marcus touched the first folder like it might explode. Raymond Cooper gets the Newark story. Cigarette shipment. 2 trucks. Thursday midnight. $50,000 in untaxed product. If Raymond's the rat, he won't be able to resist calling his FBI handler. The money's too big. The details too perfect. What makes you think he'll bite? Because Raymond's got gambling debts, Marcus said quietly. 3 different bookies. Owes maybe $15,000 total. If he thinks the feds will pay him for this tip, he'll make the call. He won't be able to help himself. Bumpy nodded slowly. The trap isn't the information, it's the pressure, the need. We're not testing loyalty, we're testing greed. He picked up the second folder. Eddie Martinez. Eddie gets the poker game. Marcus opened it, showed fabricated details, high stakes, politicians, businessmen. Wednesday night, Upper East Side penthouse. We tell Eddie we need security. Someone watching the door. If he's dirty, he'll feed this to the feds because politicians mean headlines. Headlines mean promotions. Promotions mean Eddie thinks he's important. And the third. Bumpy's hand hovered over the last folder, the one with Squeaky's name written in invisible ink. Marcus hesitated. His throat went tight. Marcus Robinson gets the Genovese meeting. Sunday afternoon. Territory negotiation. Bronx. We tell him it's confidential. Sensitive. That his job is making sure nobody outside the family knows it's happening. And if Squeaky's the rat, Bumpy's voice was flat, emotionless. But Marcus had known him 20 years, could hear the pain underneath. If Squeaky's the rat, he'll call the FBI Saturday night, tell them about the meeting, give them location, time, participants, and Sunday morning, federal agents will show up to a meeting that doesn't exist. Marcus crushed his cigarette in the ashtray. And we'll know. We'll know it was him. Bumpy stood, walked to the window. Rain hammered against the glass. Squeaky's mother, Dorothy, her surgery. You confirmed the payment. Confirmed. Marcus pulled out a receipt. You paid $12,300 through the hospital foundation. November 3rd, 3 weeks before the Amsterdam Avenue raid. The surgery was scheduled and paid for. Dorothy Robinson was never in danger. But we told Squeaky she was. We told the hospital to tell him the bill wasn't covered, to tell him she'd die without immediate payment, to make him desperate. Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. We manufactured the crisis. Bumpy. We created the pressure that made him betray us. If he's the rat, and I think he is, we pushed him into it. No. Bumpy turned from the window, eyes cold as winter steel. We created circumstances. He made choices. Pressure reveals character. It doesn't create it. If Squeaky sold us out to save his mother, that means when the moment came, he valued her life over ours. That's not wrong. That's human. But it's still betrayal. And betrayal still has consequences. Marcus's hands wouldn't stop shaking. What are you going to do to him when we confirm it's Squeaky? When the math closes and we know for certain? Bumpy was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. Dangerous soft. I'm going to show him mercy. I'm not going to kill him. I'm going to let him live, but he's going to wish I hadn't. He's going to wake up every morning and wish I'd put a bullet in his head instead of what I'm actually going to do. Which is, erase him. Bumpy buttoned his coat. Delete him from every memory, every conversation, every story. Make him invisible while he's still breathing. Let him walk through Harlem seeing faces he knows, calling names nobody responds to, existing in a world that refuses to acknowledge his existence. Marcus felt ice in his stomach. That's worse than killing him. That's the point. Bumpy picked up the folders. Guns kill bodies. What I'm planning kills everything else. kills identity, kills belonging, kills the connections that make being human bearable. He'll be alive but socially dead, present but erased, breathing but non-existent. Jesus Christ. Bumpy. Don't. Bumpy's voice cut like a blade. Don't say his name wasn't Jesus. Don't talk to me about mercy. Squeaky's mother is alive because of me. I paid for her surgery. I made sure she was safe. And if Squeaky sold me out anyway, if he betrayed me after I saved his mother, then he doesn't deserve mercy. He deserves to live with what he did. Forever. Consciously. Aware every single day that he destroyed himself for nothing. He moved toward the door. Folders under his arm. 3 stories. 3 tests. 3 potential death sentences typed on clean white paper. When do you tell them? Marcus's voice was barely audible. Tonight. Raymond at the pool hall where he feels like a king. Eddie at his sister's restaurant where family makes him soft. Squeaky at the barbershop at 3:15 p.m. right before closing, when the room is full and everyone can watch him take the bait. And then we wait 72 hours. Bumpy opened the door. Rain and cold air rushed in. 72 hours and one of these stories reaches the FBI. One of these traps springs. One of these men reveals himself. And when he does, when the mathematics balance and the equation closes, someone learns what happens when you bet against Bumpy Johnson and lose. The door closed. Marcus sat alone in his office, surrounded by law books that meant nothing in a world where justice was administered in barbershops and betrayal was punished with erasure. 3 folders were walking through Harlem now. 3 loaded guns. One would fire. One would reveal the rat. And when it did, someone would learn that death wasn't the worst thing that could happen to you. Living was. The Brooklyn waterfront at 11:45 p.m. was a graveyard of rusted metal and broken dreams. Special Agent Robert Davidson sat in his black Ford, engine running, heat blasting, watching the access road through binoculars that showed him nothing but darkness and rain. 15 minutes. Morrison checked his watch for the 10th time. 15 minutes until the shipment arrives. 2 trucks, 50,000 in cigarettes. This is it. This is the bus that breaks Bumpy Johnson's empire wide open. Behind them, 4 more vehicles held 16 federal agents, enough firepower to stop an army. Warrants in hand, cameras ready. This was supposed to be the moment, the culmination of 2 months of intelligence from their informant. The payoff. Davidson's radio crackled. Alpha team in position. South entrance covered. No movement, no activity. Docks are dead quiet. Bravo team. North entrance. Same situation. Nothing moving. No trucks. No personnel. Just rain and empty warehouses. 11:50 p.m. 10 minutes. Morrison shifted in his seat, nervous energy bleeding through. They're being cautious, doing counter-surveillance, making sure it's clean before they commit. Standard criminal procedure. They'll show. But Davidson's gut was screaming. That instinct developed over 12 years of law enforcement. That animal sense that separates dead cops from living ones, it was telling him something was fundamentally wrong here. How solid is the informant's intel? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Rock solid. Every tip for 2 months has been accurate. The warehouse raid, the numbers runner, the poker game. This source knows Bumpy's operation from the inside, knows it intimately, knows things nobody on the outside could possibly know. Morrison sounded confident. Too confident. 11:55 p.m. 5 minutes. The rain intensified, sheeting down so hard the wipers couldn't keep up. The docks were a blur of darkness and water. No movement, no lights, no trucks. Something's wrong, Davidson said quietly. Something's been wrong since we got here. They're just late. Criminals are always. No. Davidson's voice was hard now. This feels wrong. This feels orchestrated. This feels like we're not hunters. We're the ones being hunted. Midnight arrived. The dock stayed empty. 12:01, 12:02, 12:03. No trucks, no cigarettes, no criminals, just federal agents sitting in the rain, slowly understanding they'd been played. Jesus Christ. Morrison's face went white. There's no shipment. There never was. This was a test. Bumpy fed different stories to different people. Fed us Brooklyn through our informant. Probably fed other locations to NYPD, other agencies. He's watching to see which story surfaces. Watching to see which lie reaches law enforcement. Davidson's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles cracked. The implications were cascading. Drowning him. Our informant isn't helping us catch Bumpy Johnson. Our informant is helping Bumpy Johnson catch them. Every tip they gave us, every raid, every bust, every piece of intelligence that wasn't them being useful. That was them digging their own grave. That was them marking themselves for execution. We need to pull them out. Morrison was already reaching for his phone. Need to get them into protective custody, if Johnson knows who they are. We can't. Davidson's voice was hollow. We don't know who they are. The information comes through anonymous drops. Pay phone calls from rotating locations. Dead drops in predetermined spots. We've never met them. Never got a name. Never got a face. We can't protect someone we can't identify. The radio crackled. All units, recommend we abort. This location is a dry hole. No activity, no targets. Nothing. Davidson sat in silence, understanding flooding through him like poison. Bumpy Johnson just used the FBI as his investigative tool. Used us to identify his traitor. Turned federal law enforcement into a weapon against his own people. And the beautiful part, the absolutely brilliant part, is it's completely legal. He didn't do anything wrong. Just fed false information to people who might be rats. Let the rats reveal themselves by seeing which false information reached us. Morrison was shaking his head. Denial fighting reality. Our informant, whoever they are, they sold out their boss. Broke every oath. Put themselves in lethal danger. They did it thinking we'd protect them. Thinking the FBI had their back. Thinking betrayal would be rewarded with safety. But we can't protect them, Davidson finished. Can't even warn them. Can't do anything except sit here understanding that someone in Harlem is walking around right now, thinking they're a federal asset when they're really a dead man walking. When they're really marked for something worse than death. He started the engine. The convoy pulled out, headlights cutting through rain, illuminating nothing but empty docks and wasted time. As they drove away, Morrison spoke quietly. That informant, whoever they are, they betrayed Bumpy Johnson for nothing. Whatever they thought they'd get money. Protection. A new life, it was all lies. We used them. Johnson used them. And now they're going to pay a price that nobody can calculate and nobody can stop. Davidson said nothing. There was nothing to say. This was the mathematics of betrayal, elegant, brutal, irreversible. Bumpy Johnson had identified his traitor not through violence but through intelligence. Had engineered a trap so sophisticated that the FBI itself became part of the mechanism. Somewhere in Harlem, that trap was closing. Not around the federal agents. Around someone who'd wake up tomorrow thinking they'd survived another day when really they'd just counted down one day closer to the moment survival ended. The Brooklyn docks disappeared in the rearview mirror. Dark and silent. The secret they held, the knowledge that someone had been sentenced to death tonight through intelligence and deduction, rather than bullets and blood, would stay buried there forever. In 3 days. Marcus "Squeaky" Robinson would sit in a barbershop chair and learn what Bumpy Johnson did to rats. Would learn that mercy wasn't quick death, was something infinitely worse. Was erasure, was deletion, was being unmade while still breathing, still seeing, still aware of what you'd lost and what you'd destroyed and what you'd become. The rain kept falling. The city kept breathing. And somewhere in the darkness, a man who didn't know he was already dead kept walking, kept talking, kept living out the last 72 hours of his existence as Marcus Robinson. After that, he'd become nothing, just empty space where a person used to be. The hospital receipt hit the barber's counter like a death certificate. White paper, black ink, $12,300. Paid in full. November 3rd, 1961. Squeaky's eyes found it before his brain processed what he was seeing. For 3 seconds, his face went through transformations, confusion melting into recognition, recognition hardening into understanding, understanding shattering into horror so pure it transcended expression. "Read it." Big Tommy's voice was flat, not angry, not sad, just final. "Read it out loud so everyone hears what you sold us out for." Squeaky's hands shook as he picked up the paper. His voice came out strangled, barely human. Riverview Medical Center. Patient Dorothy Robinson. Cardiac surgery. Amount $12,300. Payment date November 3rd, 1961. Status paid in full. 3 weeks before Amsterdam Avenue, Raymond Cooper said from the back. 3 weeks before you called the FBI and told them about the warehouse. 3 weeks before you betrayed everyone in this room. The scissors clattered to the floor. The sound sharp, metallic, cut through the silence like a scream. "Your mother's surgery." Eddie Martinez's voice was thick with something that might have been grief or might have been rage. "The one you said was going to kill her. The one you said you couldn't afford. The one you said forced you to make a deal with federal agents." Squeaky's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. "But the hospital said they told me she needed $12,000 or she'd die. They said I had to come up with the money immediately, or we told them to say that." Bumpy Johnson's voice came from the doorway. He stepped into the light and every man in the room turned to look at him. "I paid your mother's surgery bill on November 3rd. Paid it anonymously through the hospital foundation. Then I told the hospital administrators to lie to you. Told them to make you desperate, make you scared, make you willing to do anything." Squeaky's face crumpled. His breath came in gasps. "Why? Why would you do that? Why would you make me think?" "Because I needed to know who would break," Bumpy said quietly. "Needed to know who would crack when family was threatened. Who would sell out their brothers when personal need became overwhelming. You weren't the only one being tested. Marcus. I fed 3 different stories to 3 different people. Brooklyn docks. Poker game. Genovese meeting. Waited to see which story reached the FBI. Brooklyn, Morrison had said on the phone 3 hours ago. FBI raided the Brooklyn docks at midnight. Found nothing. Which means whoever you told that story to is your rat. And Bumpy had told the Brooklyn story to Squeaky. Had watched him take it in. Had seen his eyes light up with the kind of information federal agents would pay for. Had known in that moment that Marcus Robinson was the infection that needed cutting out. Squeaky's knees buckled. He gripped the chair to keep from collapsing completely. So my mother was never dying. The surgery was paid for. I betrayed everyone, destroyed my entire life for a crisis that didn't exist. You betrayed us because when pressure came, that's who you were, Bumpy corrected, voice surgical. I didn't make you a traitor. I just created the circumstances that let you reveal your true nature. The FB, I didn't corrupt you. They just gave you an excuse to become what you always had the capacity to be. But I thought I believed, Squeaky's voice broke into something that wasn't quite words anymore, just sounds, just the noise a man makes when his entire reality shatters. "You believed what you wanted to believe," Raymond said. "You wanted permission to betray us, wanted a reason that would let you sleep at night. So when the FBI offered you that reason, you took it, grabbed it with both hands, never questioned whether it was real because questioning would have meant admitting you were betraying us for nothing." Eddie stepped forward, his face twisted with something ugly and painful. "I vouched for you. When you needed money, I lent it to you. When you needed help, I was there. I brought you into jobs, made sure you got paid, treated you like a brother. And you—" His voice cracked. He had to stop, had to breathe, had to fight back whatever was trying to come out. "You sold me out, sold all of us out, for money you didn't need to save a mother who was never dying." "I'm sorry." The words burst out of Squeaky like something being vomited. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. They told me the FB. I said they'd make sure my mother got care. Said they'd protect me. Said if I just gave them information about operations, just confirmed things they already suspected, then everything would be fine. I thought I was being smart, thought I was protecting my family while also selling out your real family." Bumpy's words landed like stones. "You thought you could serve two masters, thought you could keep us happy while feeding information to the feds, thought you were smarter than everyone else, thought you'd figured out how to have it both ways. I was wrong." Tears were streaming down Squeaky's face now, snot running from his nose, his whole body shaking. "I know I was wrong. I know what I did. But please, please just kill me. Put a bullet in my head. End this. Don't do whatever you're planning. Just make it quick. Please." "You don't get quick." Big Tommy's voice was stone. "Quick is mercy. Quick is what we give to enemies we respect. You're not an enemy. You're not even worth hating. You're just a mistake that needs correcting." Old Man Washington spoke from the circle, his voice carrying the weight of 70 years. "My wife died 5 years ago. Cancer. Took 18 months. We couldn't afford the treatment. I never asked the family for help because I didn't want to be a burden. I watched her die slowly because I believed loyalty meant bearing your own weight. And you sold us out for a surgery that was already paid for a crisis that didn't exist. That's not betrayal born of love. That's betrayal born of cowardice." Squeaky's face was ash gray now, the color of death, the color of men who've stopped living even though their hearts keep beating. "What are you going to do to me?" Bumpy stepped closer. His hand moved, everyone tensed, but he didn't strike. He just reached out and gently touched Squeaky's shoulder. The gesture was almost tender, almost kind, which made it infinitely more terrifying. "Nothing violent," Bumpy said softly. "Nothing that leaves marks. Nothing that FBI agents can photograph or prosecutors can charge me with. I'm just going to erase you. Marcus, going to delete you from every memory, every conversation, every story. You'll still walk through Harlem, still breathe, still see familiar faces. But those faces won't see you back. Those people won't acknowledge you. Those memories won't include you anymore." "That's not, you can't." Squeaky's protest died in his throat. "Watch me." Bumpy removed his hand. 22 men in this room. 22 witnesses. Starting right now, you stop existing. Your name stops being spoken. Your stories stop being told. Your place in our history gets edited out or given to someone else. You become blank space. You become the pause in the story where nobody was. Squeaky's breathing was coming in hitches now, hyperventilating, his body going into panic mode as his mind processed what was being done to him. No. Please no. Anything but that. Beat me. Cut me. Shoot me. But don't make me invisible. Don't erase me. I can't, I won't. You don't have a choice. Eddie's voice was dead. None of us do now. You made your choice when you picked up that phone. Made it when you sold our secrets for government money. Made it when you valued their promises over our brotherhood. This is just the consequence. This is just what happens when you break the only rule that mattered. Raymond pulled the torn photograph from his pocket, the one with Squeaky's face ripped out. He held it up so Squeaky could see the ragged hole where he used to be. This is you now. This is what you are. A gap. An absence. A piece of nothing where something used to exist. Bumpy grabbed Squeaky by the collar, not violently, just firmly, lifted him from the chair. The cape fell away. Squeaky's legs barely supported him. Bumpy walked him toward the door, and the circle parted, 22 men watching. 22 faces showing nothing. 22 witnesses to an execution that didn't kill the body but destroyed everything else. The door opened. December wind. Rain. Cold. Bumpy pushed him through. Squeaky stumbled, caught himself, turned back. The door slammed. Click. That sound. That tiny, mechanical sound. Hit harder than any bullet, because that was the sound of being locked out, of being expelled, of being cast out from the only family that had ever mattered. Inside. Silence held for 3 heartbeats. Then Eddie Martinez put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. "He was my friend," Eddie whispered. "He stopped being your friend when he betrayed us." Bumpy said, "Grieve if you need to, but grieve for who he was, not what he became." Outside, Squeaky pressed his hands against the locked door, sobbing. Inside, 22 men stood in silence, understanding what they'd just done. They'd killed Marcus Robinson without touching him, had erased him while he was still breathing, had made him a ghost in his own life, and that was justice. The clock hit 3:26 p.m. Bumpy Johnson stepped into the center, and 22 men formed a circle, bodies moving like wolves, creating a wall of flesh that sealed every exit. Squeaky sat frozen in the barber chair, cape around his neck. His eyes jumped from face to face, searching for mercy. Found only stone. No judge, no jury. Just us. Bumpy's voice was a blade. Just the family you sold for $12,000. Big Tommy moved first. He grabbed the back of Squeaky's head and slammed it forward, forcing him to look down at his own lap. "Don't look at us. You lost that right when you picked up that phone and called the feds." Squeaky's breath came in gasps. "Please, I can explain. My mother was dying. I had no choice. Your mother was never dying." Raymond Cooper stepped forward, pulled out the photograph crew outside the Apollo. He held it up so Squeaky could see his own face smiling back. Then slowly, deliberately, tore his face out of it. The ripping sound echoed like bone breaking. "Bumpy paid for her surgery 2 weeks before you betrayed us. You sold us out for a crisis that didn't exist." Squeaky's face crumpled. Tears started streaming. "No. That can't be. The hospital said they told me she needed. We made them tell you that." Bumpy's voice was surgical, each word a cut. "We created the pressure. We manufactured the crisis, because we needed to know who would break. And you broke. Marcus, you broke so easily it was almost disappointing." Eddie Martinez stepped forward, eyes red, jaw clenched like he was fighting something inside himself. His hands shook as he pulled out a bookie's notebook. For a moment, just one heartbeat, his eyes met Squeaky's, and something passed between them. 20 years of friendship. 20 years of brotherhood. 20 years that were about to be erased with a single black line. "I'm sorry," Eddie whispered, And the apology wasn't for what he was about to do. It was for what Squeaky had forced him to witness. He drew the line through Squeaky's name. His hand trembled. A single tear rolled down his cheek before he wiped it away violently, angry at himself for the weakness. "Don't you dare cry for him," Big Tommy said to Eddie, voice hard. "He didn't cry for us when he was feeding our secrets to the feds. He didn't think about you when he was signing our death warrants." Bumpy moved closer, reached down, his hand wrapped around Squeaky's throat, not choking. Just holding, just making him feel the pressure, making him understand how easy it would be to squeeze, to end it, to make the pain stop. Squeaky's eyes went wide, tears flowing freely now, breath hitching. "You feel that?" Bumpy's voice was almost gentle. "That's how close you are to mercy. That's how easy it would be to just end this. But you don't get mercy. You don't get this easy way out." He released Squeaky's throat, nodded to Jesse the barber. Jesse stepped forward, holding a straight razor, the same one he'd been using to cut hair for 30 years. He opened it slowly. The blade caught the light. Squeaky saw it and started hyperventilating, body shaking so hard the chair rattled. "No, please, please don't. I'll leave. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again. Please." His voice cracked, became a sob, became begging so raw it was painful to hear. Jesse pressed the cold steel against Squeaky's throat, not cutting, just resting there, just letting him feel the edge. Squeaky went completely still, eyes rolling back in terror, certain this was the end, certain the blade would bite and blood would flow, and it would finally be over. 7 seconds passed, each one an eternity, each one a lifetime. The blade stayed pressed against skin, but never cut, never moved, just held there while Squeaky's mind shattered, trying to understand if he was already dying or still alive or somewhere in between. Then Jesse removed the blade, folded it closed, put it back in his pocket. "That's the only time that razor will ever touch you again," Jesse said quietly. "Because you're not worth the blood. You're not worth the effort. You're not worth anything at all." Old Man Washington spoke from the circle, voice ancient and absolute. "My grandson asks about the old days. I'll tell him every name in this room, every story, every battle. But you become blank space. You become the pause in the story where nobody was. You become nothing." Squeaky was openly sobbing now, snot running from his nose, tears soaking his shirt, body convulsing with the kind of crying that comes from realizing you've destroyed yourself and there's no way back. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please. I'll do anything. Anything. Just don't do this. Don't erase me. Please." Nobody answered. His begging fell into silence and died there. Bumpy grabbed him by the collar, rough, violent, the grip of someone handling garbage. He yanked Squeaky from the chair so hard the cape tore away, dragged him toward the door. Squeaky's legs barely worked. He stumbled, caught himself, stumbled again. The circle parted. 22 witnesses, 22 men with wet eyes and hard faces, watching a man be destroyed in a way that left no marks on his body, but would scar his soul forever. The door opened. December wind rushed in, cold and merciless. Rain hammered the sidewalk beyond. Bumpy shoved Squeaky through, not pushed, shoved, hard enough that Squeaky fell to his knees on the wet concrete. Squeaky turned back, hands reaching, mouth opening to beg one more time. The door slammed shut. Click. The lock engaged. That sound small, metallic, final as a bullet hit harder than any physical blow. Because that click meant it was over, meant there was no appeal. Meant 22 men had just agreed to pretend he no longer existed. Inside, Silence held for 3 full heartbeats. Then Eddie Martinez put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. He wasn't crying, wouldn't let himself cry, but the grief was there. Visible, raw. "He was my friend," Eddie said through his hands. "We grew up together. He stopped being your friend the moment he picked up that phone." Bumpy's voice allowed no softness. "Grieve if you need to, but grieve for who he was, not what he became, because what he became isn't worth your tears." Outside, Squeaky knelt in the rain, hands pressed against the locked door, sobbing so hard his whole body shook. 22 men on the other side, men he'd known his entire life. And not one would open that door. Not one would acknowledge him. Not one would remember his name. Inside, Bumpy turned to face the room. "Guns kill people," he said, and every man leaned in to hear. "Bullets end lives, but silence kills memory, kills history, kills every connection that makes us human. When nobody remembers your name, when nobody speaks it, when nobody acknowledges you existed, that's death. That's real death. The kind you can't escape because you're still breathing while being dead inside." 22 heads nodded. Understanding passed without words. They'd witnessed execution today. Not of a body, of a soul. Special Agent Davidson kicked the barbershop door open at 3:47 p.m. Not knocked. Kicked. The door slammed against the wall hard enough to crack plaster. 2 agents stormed in behind him. Morrison and Patterson, hands near their weapons. Badges up. Faces carved from federal authority that meant nothing in this room. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." Davidson's voice was a weapon. "Nobody moves, nobody leaves. We're looking for Marcus Robinson, and someone in this room knows where he is." The barbershop went silent. Not startled. Silence. Deliberate silence. 20 men occupied the space, sitting, standing, reading, and not one flinched when the door slammed. Not one looked up when badges flashed. They just existed, still as statues. Faces showing nothing. "I said nobody moves," Davidson shouted, anger bleeding through. "Marcus Robinson, Squeaky. Where is he?" Jesse the barber kept cutting hair, scissors moving, snip, snip, like federal agents didn't exist. Patterson moved fast, grabbed the customer's shoulder. "I'm talking to you. Where is Marcus Robinson?" The customer slowly turned his head, looked at Patterson's hand on his shoulder, then looked up at his face, said nothing, just stared. The silence was more threatening than any words could be. "Get your hand off him." Big Tommy's voice came from the corner, flat and dangerous. "He's getting a haircut, not committing a crime." Patterson's hand stayed put. "We can arrest everyone in this room for obstruction of justice, for harboring a federal witness, for what Raymond Cooper stood up, folding his newspaper with deliberate slowness, for getting our haircut, for sitting in chairs, for existing in our own neighborhood. You going to arrest 20 black men for being in a barbershop on a Wednesday afternoon? Go ahead. See how that plays in court." Davidson's jaw clenched so hard his teeth should have cracked. He moved to Old Man Washington, the oldest person in the room. Figured age might mean weakness. He crouched down, tried to make his voice gentle. "Sir, I know you've seen things. I know you know Marcus Robinson. We just need to know if he's safe. If you've seen him, if you know where he might be." Old Man Washington looked at Davidson for a long moment. His eyes were cloudy with age, but sharp with intelligence. His mouth opened, for one heartbeat. Davidson thought he was going to talk, thought age and fear might break through the wall of silence. Then Big Tommy cleared his throat. Just a sound, just a small noise from across the room. Old Man Washington's eyes flicked toward Tommy, then back to Davidson. His mouth closed, his face went blank. I don't know any Marcus Robinson, Washington said, and the lie was so blatant, so obvious, so deliberate that it became an insult. Maybe you got the wrong barbershop. Davidson stood up fast, fists clenched. You're lying. You all are. You think I don't see it. You think I don't know every person in this room knows exactly where Robinson is. You think. We think you should leave. Eddie Martinez stood up. And suddenly all 20 men were standing. Not threatening, not advancing. Just standing. A wall of bodies between the federal agents and whatever truth they were protecting. Morrison pulled Davidson back. We can't force them. We don't have probable cause. We don't have warrants. We can't. The hell we can't. Davidson's voice was rising, losing control, frustration bleeding into rage. One of you sold out your boss. One of you is a federal informant, and we're trying to protect him. We're trying to save his life, and you're protecting him. Raymond's laugh was sharp as broken glass. You used him. You made him promises you couldn't keep. You turned him into a traitor, and now you want us to help you find him so you can use him some more. We're not protecting him. We're protecting ourselves. From you. From what you turn people into. Davidson's control snapped. He grabbed Raymond by the shirt, shoved him against the wall. You want to play games. You want to obstruct a federal investigation. I can make your life hell. I can have agents on every corner. I can audit every business. You can do nothing. Bumpy Johnson's voice came from the doorway. He'd been there the whole time, watching, silent. Now he stepped into the light and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. You can flash badges, make threats, wave authority around like it means something. But at the end of the day, you need us to cooperate, need us to speak, need us to remember. And we're choosing not to. Davidson released Raymond, turned to face Bumpy. You're Bumpy Johnson. You're the one Robinson was informing on. You're the one who has the most reason to hurt him. I don't know any Robinson. Bumpy's face was stone. Don't know what you're talking about. He's in danger. Don't you understand that if something happens to him, then that's between him and whatever he did? Bumpy stepped closer. But nobody in this room knows him. Nobody's seen him. Nobody remembers his name. So unless you have evidence of a crime, unless you have probable cause to be here, I suggest you leave before I call my lawyer and file harassment charges against federal agents who broke into a private business and assaulted customers. Davidson's hands were shaking with rage. He wanted to arrest everyone, wanted to drag them all downtown, wanted to break this wall of silence with authority and force and federal power. But he couldn't, because they were right. He had no evidence, no probable cause, no legal justification for being here. Just frustration and failure and the growing understanding that he'd lost this battle before it started. This isn't over, Davidson said, but even he could hear how hollow it sounded. Yes, it is. Bumpy's smile was cold as January. It ended the moment your informant picked up the phone. Ended when he chose you over us. Ended when he learned the hard way that the government makes promises it can't keep, and we make promises we always keep. Now get out of our barbershop. The 3 agents left, not walking, retreating. Defeated men carrying badges that meant nothing against community consensus, against collective silence, against power that didn't need guns or threats or violence. Outside. Davidson stood in the rain, shaking with rage. Then he turned and punched the brick wall, hard. His knuckles split. Blood ran. Pain exploded through his hand. We lost, he said through gritted teeth. We sent Robinson in there. We used him. We made him promises. And now he's dead or worse, and we can't do anything. Can't protect him. Can't save him. Can't even find him because an entire neighborhood has agreed to pretend he doesn't exist. Morrison nodded slowly. This is what happens when we turn people into informants. We think we're giving them protection. We're really just giving them a death sentence, just making it slower, more cruel, as they drove away. Behind them, the barbershop returned to normal, scissors cutting, life continuing. And somewhere in Harlem, Marcus Robinson walked through streets where everyone knew his face but nobody knew his name. 6 months later, the rain was back, hammering Harlem streets like it had that December day. Squeaky Marcus Robinson stood on the corner of 125th and Lenox, watching people pass, watching life continue, watching the world move around him like he was invisible. He'd lost 40 pounds. His clothes hung off him like a scarecrow. His eyes had gone hollow, sunk deep into his skull. He looked like a ghost. Felt like one too. A group of men walked past men he'd known his whole life. Raymond Cooper, Eddie Martinez, Big Tommy. He opened his mouth to speak. "Hey, it's me. It's—" They walked right past. Not hostile, not cruel. Just blank. Like looking at air. Like he didn't exist. "Eddie." Squeaky grabbed Martinez's sleeve. "Eddie, please. Just acknowledge me. Just say my name. Just—" Eddie looked down at his sleeve like a piece of trash had touched it, pulled his arm away, kept walking, didn't say a word. Squeaky stood there, arm still extended, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered to their backs. "I'm so sorry. Please, please just—" But they were gone, disappeared into the crowd, into the life that continued without him. Then he saw Bumpy Johnson walking down the opposite sidewalk, alone. For one moment, one perfect, impossible moment, they made eye contact. Squeaky's heart jumped. Maybe if he apologized, maybe if he begged, maybe if he explained, maybe Bumpy would. Squeaky stepped into the street. "Bumpy, please, I need to." Bumpy's eyes looked right through him. Not past him. Through him. Like he was glass. Like he was nothing. Like 6 months ago. Bumpy had deleted him from memory so completely that even seeing him in person didn't register as recognizing another human being. Bumpy kept walking. Didn't slow. Didn't pause. Didn't acknowledge. Squeaky stood in the middle of the street, rain soaking him, tears mixing with water. Body shaking. "I exist," he screamed. "I'm right here, I'm alive, you can see me." But Bumpy was already gone. Turned the corner, disappeared. And Squeaky understood finally, completely, that this was forever. This was his life now. Not for 6 months. Not for a year. Forever. Until the day he died. He would walk through a world where people saw him but refused to acknowledge what they saw. Where he existed, but didn't matter. Where he was alive, but socially dead. He sank to his knees in the middle of the street. Rain pounded down. He put his face in his hands and sobbed. Not quietly. Not with dignity. He sobbed like a child. Like a man who'd lost everything. Like someone who'd finally understood that some prices are too high and some mistakes can never be fixed. A car honked. He didn't move. The car went around him. Life continued. The world didn't stop. Didn't care. Didn't notice that Marcus Robinson was kneeling in the street having the final breakdown. The ultimate realization that he'd traded his humanity for $12,000 that bought a surgery his mother never needed. Back in the barbershop, Jesse locked the door at closing time. The chair where Squeaky had sat remained empty. Would always remain empty. A permanent memorial to what happened when you broke faith. The torn photograph still hung on the wall. Squeaky's face a ragged hole. New customers asked about it less and less. Soon, nobody would ask at all. Soon, that gap would just be part of the picture, part of the landscape. Unremarkable. That was the genius of it, the cruelty. You weren't killed and made into a martyr. You weren't imprisoned and made into a victim. You were simply erased, deleted, made into nothing while still breathing, still walking, still existing but not mattering. Bumpy Johnson sat in his apartment that night, whiskey in hand, looking out over Harlem. His empire was stronger than ever. The message had been clear. The lesson had been taught. Nobody had betrayed him since Squeaky. Nobody had even thought about it, because what happened to Squeaky was worse than any bullet, worse than any prison sentence, worse than any physical torture. It was psychological. It was permanent. It was watching yourself become nothing while still being aware enough to know what you'd lost. The phone rang. He answered. "Mr. Johnson." It was Marcus Webb, his lawyer. FBI closed the Robinson case officially, listed him as a fugitive who fled protection. They're not looking anymore. Good. Bumpy's voice was quiet. Let them think he ran. Let them think he escaped. Better than them knowing the truth that he's still here. Still walking our streets. Still seeing our faces. Just not being seen back. He hung up, finished his whiskey, looked out at the rain-soaked streets where somewhere a man with no name walked in circles, trying to remember what it felt like to be human, to be acknowledged, to matter. That was the price of betrayal in Bumpy Johnson's Harlem. Not death, not violence, just erasure. Just becoming nothing while still being everything you used to be. Trapped in a body that remembered being someone when nobody else did. The rain kept falling. Would keep falling forever, it seemed. Washing away footprints, washing away evidence, washing away the memory of a man who'd once existed, but now didn't. And in barbershops across Harlem, the story would be told in whispers, never naming names, never giving details. Just the lesson, loyalty matters, betrayal costs, and some prices are so high, you pay them forever. If they offered you money to betray 20 brothers who die to protect you, would you take it, or would you choose silence, choose loyalty? Choose the family that makes life worth living, like if you understand why silence saves lives. Subscribe if you want to hear the stories nobody else dares tell.